Well, we are live. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Angeline Constantinou. I am the founder, life coach, and podcaster of Let's Break the Silence with Angeline podcast. Today is Domestic Violence Awareness Month for the whole month of October. So we're going to be bringing a special guest on here in a few minutes, and we're going to be bringing the fire here and raise awareness about religious fraud. So welcome to my podcast. You can like and subscribe to my podcast, Let's Break the Silence with Angeline, on Anchor FM, Spotify, Google, Apple, and all the live streams. And please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Angeline Mitchell. And this episode will be uploaded on my YouTube channel and on my podcast first thing Monday morning at 7 a.m., where we launch all incredible podcast episodes. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my good friend Paulette Buchanan. I had the pleasure of connecting with her through podcastguest.com. She is an incredible woman. So she is a former educator and crime victim survivor who now educates the public on how to cope with and even heal from aggressive stalking, death threats, cybercrimes, religious cult tactics, and the weaponization of the courts by stalkers, including religious cult leaders. She has written her first book, Fighting for Justice, Religious Fraud, Mental Illness, and the Collapse of Law and Order, that details the origins and continuation of my 4 older brothers' abusive behavior and the failures of our government and our courts to adequately address severe mental health problems and criminal actions. And I'm really happy to bring her on because she's going to be sharing her story, because I feel that we need to bring awareness. And so without further ado, here's Paulette. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. We have escaped most of the wrath of and fury of Ian. We're getting just a little bit of rain and cloud cover, a little bit of wind, but not too much. It hasn't been too bad, but my prayers are for everyone who has really been affected by it. It's been pretty bad.
Pretty bad. Yeah, I know. Praying for everyone. I have a lot of friends who live down in Florida.
As do we.
Yeah. Tampa Bay, but thankfully it was just power failures and not a lot of damage. But prayers go out to Fort Myers, to people. Yeah, their homes and businesses were destroyed. It's just a shame that these things happen. That's probably one of the reasons why I won't move to Florida, because of the hurricane. I can't deal with it,
We can't either. That and the alligators.
Right. I love the ocean and everything, but it's just...
I do too. We live in the mountains, and I grew up along the water, the coast, and I absolutely miss walking along the beach on a regular basis. So yeah. I don't have a Tennessee accent.
So where do you live? Where are you based out?
I'm originally from Connecticut. I lived and grew up in Mystic, Connecticut, where the seaport is.
Oh, I love Mystic.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little place. Connecticut's politics got a bit crazy, and a lot of crime and corruption. And, the reason why I wrote my book actually is because a civil rights attorney in Connecticut advised me to say, you really need to address these issues. You really need to write about your experience. Because she said there are a lot of problems in our court system. So, I took her advice. It took me basically about 8 years to write my book. Just one thing after another, and just it's a hard thing to have to go through and relive a lot of stuff.
Right. Oh yeah, I'm sure. I know that when we connected, this is a very, very hard issue to address. And I commend you for writing your book, Fighting for Justice. And, because when I read your bio and introduced you, How did this all come about? What happened? I mean,
Yeah, I get asked that all the time.
yeah, so
Like decades past. It's like, it really goes back. These are four of my older brothers. It really started before I was even born. Um, from things that my mother told me, other family members told me, that they started exhibiting some problems, mental health problems, even when they were children. Um, Having ideas of superiority over their peers, over teachers, or any adult, not wanting to be accountable to anybody, things like that, and just mean, not having any empathy, and my parents, there's no perfect parent out there. My parents definitely had their own faults, but they weren't abusive to each other. And they tried to instill within all of us, when I came along, the idea that there are rights and wrongs. There's certain things you do and you don't do. And that just never stuck with them. And my father died when I was 10. So at that point, my brothers were teenagers. They all just basically beat each other up for top dog position. They were already fighting with themselves, sometimes with their peers, definitely with my father. My mother was a very petite woman, maybe only weighed about 105, 110. They shoved her into the wall a couple of times, both before my father died and after. So my father had to defend basically my mother, his wife, against their own sons. They're just very angry people. And some of it I go into my book about nature versus nurture, genetics, things like that, because on both sides of my family, there were other family members, uncles and aunts, which would be our great uncles and aunts, who had mental health problems, mostly the uncles. Go back far enough, I think it was like a great-great-grandmother who had some mental health problems on my mother's side, but most of it was on the men in the family. My father's father, everybody hated him. He was just a mean-spirited person. And he died when they were still very young. And then my mom's uncles, one in particular, died in a prison for the criminally insane. He had raped children, and that's where he died. And some of these characteristics in my brothers, it's like it skipped a generation, and it started coming out in my brothers. They've all had police records, arrest records, mostly for violence against women. They've all had experience with being involuntarily treated for mental health problems, severe mental health problems. At least two of them I know, I think possibly three, have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And we don't have a mental health system. 50 years ago, if this had happened, they would have been permanently committed. And true, a lot of the mental health systems, they were state run, a lot of them were not good, but there were some that were helpful. And we really basically, it's one of the issues I bring up in my book, because one of the subtitles is mental illness. I deal with the fact of how brutal it is for any culture to throw the mentally ill out onto the streets. It would be like closing down our nursing homes and throwing people with Alzheimer's or ALS or Parkinson's disease out on the streets, or closing down our hospitals. Yes, there are some bad nursing homes. Yes, there are some bad hospitals. Do you shut them all down, or do you improve them?
Right.
Give you an example, when they shortly after they had closed one of the mental hospitals in Connecticut, where my husband grew up in Middletown, Connecticut, there was an annual summer fair type of thing down Main Street. They would close it off to car traffic, and they would just have a walking boulevard. All the shops had special sales, things like that. Brought out a lot of people. And this person who had been recently released from the closed mental health hospital in broad daylight took a knife and stabbed to death this little girl as she stood next to her mother.
What?
Yeah. And this is what the legislators did not even consider. All they thought of were dollar signs. Oh, we're going to save so much money if we shut down the mental hospitals. And then they bought the lie. And sometimes it was because of the ACLU and other people with more, I have to say, a more left-leaning agenda. They said, well, we'll have these community health centers. that the mentally ill can go to get, you know, their medications and their treatment and counseling, stuff like that. Well, if you're schizophrenic, if you are a psychopath, you're intelligent, you know the difference between right and wrong, or if you're a psychotic and you really do believe pink elephants are chasing you around the room, you're not going to go to a community mental health facility. You're not capable of reasoning that way. So the legislators and the courts, the judges, really were basically trying to practice psychiatry without a license. They did not understand the severity of the problem. And so when you get down to people like my brothers, when they're roaming free, they've never been able to hold down jobs for very long. They've been fired or laid off from their jobs. They have been under, like I said, state care and everything. It's just, you get this failure in the system, and you therefore have problems with crime increasing. You have problems where victims simply cannot get any of the laws enforced because, as we were told multiple times, no one wants to put out the money. But yet, you know, you have all these problems. You have to deal with them. Then you factor in, like with the worst of my brothers, who claims he's a pastor. He claims he gets dreams and visions from Jesus to go after people, to be the hand of God's wrath against people. Then you see people like him weaponizing the court system and filing lawsuits against me, against my husband, against his ex-wife, her husband, against anybody he feels like. And again, about 50 years ago, a previous generation of judges would never have allowed these lawsuits to go forward. He never hires an attorney. He does it what's called pro se or self-represented. Huge problem. I mean, if you look up the terms in any search engine, stalking through the courts, things like that, you will find incidents where people have just filed the most ridiculous, the most time-consuming, most wasteful lawsuits. They're meritless. They are intended to abuse. And we, after 9 lawsuits in 3 different states, state and federal court, we now finally have permanent injunctions against my brother in state and federal court to prevent him from ever suing anybody ever again, not just us, but anybody else. But I mean, he actually boasted about this at one time online publicly, that the only reason he files these lawsuits is to cause people financial damage, because you know, there was one lawsuit we were able to fight by ourselves, but most of the time you need to hire an attorney because there are complicated issues. There are just procedures that you're not really aware of, the complexity of the court system and how they do things, unless you're there studying things left and right, which most people don't have the time to do. You really do have to hire an attorney, and judges tend to not give as much credibility if you are a pro se defendant and you're trying to, on your own, without an attorney, fight somebody who has filed a lawsuit against you without an attorney. So your need to hire an attorney gives you that extra credibility to your true statements. I mean, it virtually is like trying to argue over and over again that 1 + 1 really is 2. And you know, the crazy defamatory lies that he had in his lawsuit, you have to defend yourself. You know, some people do. Yeah, some people have actually said to it, well, just ignore him. Just ignore the lawsuits. You cannot do that. That's just it. Most people, if they try to do that, the next thing they know, that this crazy person would get a default judgment, and then they could seize their bank accounts. They could garnish their wages. You can't ignore a lawsuit. It is a legal document that you have to respond to. And I'll give you for instance, another form of basically abuse of the court system. Years ago, my husband had a coworker, and they lived in a neighborhood, and there was a guy who shared the back properties of all of the neighbors, and he kept claiming that they were infringing upon his property. He claimed that all of the town records on property lines were all wrong, and that they needed to give up, it was like 10, 15 feet of their backyards to him. He sued pro se without an attorney, and he kept filing continuances and motions after motions, and he kept going after people. This coworker of my husband ended up suffering a miscarriage. and she was never able to have a child again. Another woman had been making good progress in her chemo, treating her for cancer. She had relapses because of all of the stress. You have to answer these stupid, abusive lawsuits. So,
Gosh.
yeah,
Wow. What
yep.
a story. Oh my goodness. But to witness that with your own brothers.
That's the tragedy. As I write in my book,
That's,
there
yeah.
are no two worse emotions to have together than intense grief and intense anger. These are my brothers. You know, it wasn't all doom and gloom growing up. We did have some happy times together. They're my brothers. It's not like an ex-partner, which is hard enough.
Right.
These are my family, you know, and we have a shared upbringing, but the abuse was always there. And, you know, people have asked, well, you know, why are you not screwed up? It's like genetics. It's a crapshoot.
It's a crapshoot, right?
Yeah.
Now, how does this now? Because this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you here on my podcast show to
Mhm.
break the silence on this.
Yeah.
You know, how does this? I mean, to me, they sound like narcissists.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
They're always the victim.
Or
Yeah.
yeah. So how does someone heal from this traumatic event? I mean, this is really bad.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, of course, my husband and I, we have gutted this out. You know, I mean, there are times we thought we were going to lose our minds because it's like, why is it the courts keep allowing this to happen? And trauma is actually, you know, psychological trauma, emotional trauma. It does actually cause damage to your brain. So, you know,
Yeah.
we would seek out counseling. And it's interesting, one of our counselors that we initially started going to, I think it was, excuse me, maybe about the third, fourth session, she said, I really can't handle this anymore because I also was a stalked victim. And it's like she, you know, suggested we meet up with somebody else who could help us a little bit better. And she did, with how do you cope with this? You know, I mean, I remember just those little tiny glimmers, mere seconds of thinking suicide is the only way out, you know? But
Right.
then tell myself, no, I'm not going to give them that. That's exactly what they want. But yeah, I mean, I have another brother. He also goes around suing everybody under the sun. And so far, there haven't been any injunctions against him by those people, even though, I mean, these lawsuits are just so abusive. And
Oh, wow.
there are some people, they make an occupation out of doing this. And it's all about power and control. And that's just it. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the narcissism thing, because I brought that out. And,
Right.
you know, you couple that with the religious aspect of things. And, you know, I have a deep faith. It has been shaken by all of this because you always ask, you know, God, you know, why do you allow these people to take their next breath? If they're going to continue doing this, you know, and raping and slaughtering souls, which is one of the names of one of my chapters in my book is people who rape and slaughter souls in the name of Jesus, you know, or any other God.
Oh
It
my
it
goodness.
does, it challenges your faith, but, you know, you have to reach the conclusion, it's you have to get the long range eternal view of things, and this is their paradise. You know, if I have to go through a temporary hell because I'm doing what is right, I'm standing up for myself, I'm speaking the truth, I'm doing what's right, and they don't like that, they just don't like the fact I exist on this earth.
Right.
You know, that's just it. They're going to enjoy as much as they're going to enjoy, however long they're going to enjoy it on this earth. And then after that, yeah, not looking too good for them for all eternity, you know. But
No, I
that's
agree.
it. It's like we have to look for the eternal, you know, in all of this. I do believe in an afterlife. I do believe, you know, that God wants us to come to Him, but people have free will. They make a choice, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, free will and choice. You hit the nail on the head.
Yep.
But to witness this, I mean, you personally witnessed this.
Hmm.
It's to me that I mean that would be very traumatic for me.
Yeah.
You know, very traumatic. So when did you write your book? When
I
did
wrote my book, what was it now? 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm trying to remember because it's been COVID. It's almost like before COVID, after COVID.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I got it published. I got it published last year. So yeah, I finally put everything all together late last year. So it's been about a year ago. Yeah, that I finally got it all like edited and everything else. Had to make the corrections and stuff like that. But I finished it probably about closer to 2 years ago, but just tweaking it here and there, you know. And again, it was a civil rights attorney who told me to do this. And, you know, I wrote my book not to just to kvetch about my problems, but rather to identify with other people, that a lot of other people were going through this. I've met other victims who have gone through this. Being a member of International Cultic Studies Association, you meet people who have also had their faith rocked because either they were born into a cult, or they somehow got wrapped up into one, or they've had family members who were in cults who tried to pressure them, like my brother forming his own cult, tried to pressure them into joining their cult, and they just absolutely refuse. And then the harassment begins. And stalking through the courts is actually a common tactic among cults and cult leaders.
Wow.
Yeah, Scientology, of course, is infamous for it. They're the biggest ones. But a lot of minor ones do it too. You know, ones you never really hear about, the obscure ones.
Right.
But,
oh, wow. So stalking in the courts.
Yeah, look that term up on you know, do a search on that, stalking through the courts.
Oh, I am. I'm definitely going to do a search on that because that's scary, you know.
It is. Yeah. And again, you can't ignore a lawsuit, you know. And you think about it, even, you know, in terms of if you have a protective order, that doesn't spare you from it. You're literally feet from your stalker in the court system. You're literally feet away from them. And I remember there was one situation in Connecticut where this ex-partner, I think it was an ex-husband, was divorced, or actually the wife was divorcing him. He didn't have a lawyer. She did. The lawyer actually took her to the courthouse in her vehicle, and her ex-husband showed up in the parking lot of the courthouse because it's a set time, set date, and he blew them both away. Then he committed suicide. And so this is the problem when you have stalking through the courts, when you get unstable people, mentally unstable people who are abusing the court system. And you know, we had heightened security. He used to threaten the court staff. He used to make, especially like the court clerks, feel really, really endangered and alarmed by his behavior. We've had in the federal court where he was suing us, and where we were actually, he had filed for bankruptcy. So we were trying to get the judgments really with a federal backing behind it, all the judgments and injunctions we had. And he apparently had threatened the judges and the court staff. And the next thing you know, our attorney's calling us and say, why are all these federal marshals here?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you tell us, because we have no idea. And I said, he probably did what he's done in other courts, and he's probably been threatening judges and everybody else. But, you know, here's the thing. They never arrest anybody. You know, I mean, we've actually had federal agents and local, you know, town law enforcement, state law enforcement saying, well, you know, here's the thing. If we arrest them, the judges are just going to throw them right back on the streets again.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, this is what we're hearing across our nation. It's like everything we've been through for the last 20 plus years. I mean, even if you go back even longer than that, it was a microcosm of everything that's now going on in so many parts of our country, where people are breaking the law left and right. And these judges are just like, even if they are arrested, the judges are just throwing them right back out on the streets again to commit more crimes. It's utter chaos. And, you know, we were actually advised by victim advocates to leave the state of Connecticut because they told us, you are never going to get any justice here, and they will never enforce the laws for you here. So your best bet is, and this is what they advise a lot of other victims, is find another state to go to where the laws are enforced a little bit better. That's why we went to Tennessee.
Oh, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Oh my God.
People, it's amazing. In the 9 years we've lived here, how many people are coming from other states where, again, you hear in the news where crime has just exploded, and the governments are not doing anything. The courts aren't doing anything. The authorities aren't doing anything. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to bring awareness, because I know, like in a domestic violence situation, like for myself,
Mm-hmm.
I had a protective order.
Yeah, I did too at one time.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Well, wipe your backside on those.
yeah, exactly. Which is honestly, I mean, in my case, the police and authorities, they knew where I was going all the time,
Yeah.
but no arrest.
Yeah.
I had to leave the home.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is this?
Yeah, we had that whole, I go through that actually in my website and in the book about the whole protective order debacle.
Ah,
And
good.
in all of this too, it's like, it's bad enough you've got somebody stalking you through the courts. And in the meantime, he's still stalking you elsewhere. You know, cyber crimes and all the different kind of hacking stuff and everything else, because he is a self-professed hacker.
Oh,
And
oh boy.
yeah, and all of that. But then you get problems with the courts themselves. We actually, and with attorneys, we have had to fire 2 attorneys. We got them fired from their law firms because of how poorly they're basically taking advantage of our situation. And they were junior attorneys. They were hiding issues from the senior attorneys. And when we brought the issues to the senior attorneys to make them aware of what was going on, those attorneys got fired.
Oh,
And
wow.
from the law firms. And we also had one judge reprimanded because she basically broke the law in court. And, you know, it's like, so we had, it was a Georgia judge. So we had her reprimanded. And I mean, this is on top of all the other things. It's like it just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And I think my point to all of this is keep fighting. No matter what, you keep fighting. You know you're in the right. Don't ever lose sight of that. Don't ever let these people beat you down. Don't ever think that you can reason or rationalize with people like this. You keep fighting. You're basically in a war that was declared upon you. You don't try to appease a bully. You don't try to make peace with a bully. You can't, because they are insatiable in trying to destroy you. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether there's a religious factor involved with like a cult-like, you know, type of situation. Anybody who's a narcissist, anybody who's a psychopath, who has zero empathy for people, who really enjoys the harm that they do to people. And again, I have seen my brothers laughing hysterically from my earliest memories, laughing hysterically when they're either scheming or actually accomplished harming people and even harming animals. So when you're dealing with somebody like that, you're not dealing with a rational person.
That's true.
You can't, and even if they were to assure you, like my brothers have done, oh, I'll never do that again. Okay, I'll stop. Don't trust them. Don't trust them at all.
They're not going to stop. That's the other. Listen, I'm no fool.
Yeah.
You know, totally get it. Totally understand. You know, because I know, like with my brother, you know, there's been some issues. Issues erupted, and make a long story short, he fought my uncle's estate for 3 years, hired 2 different attorneys, but the second attorney finally talked some sense into him. So we're in the process of settling my uncle's estate. But why did they fight? I mean, you know, he makes him, you know, like in the case of my brother, and this is the first time I'm talking about this, by the way, because a trigger just happened. Okay. Why do, you know, they make themselves look good in front of, you know, like my family, you know, my cousins, but then behind their back, behind my back.
Yeah. It's about power and control.
Okay.
It really is about power and control that, you know, I always try to make people understand it like this. Think of the things you enjoy doing. It could be crocheting. It could be volunteer work. It could be maybe you're an accountant and you just love working with numbers. You love making things work for people. Maybe, you know, whatever. You're in human services. You really love helping people. Think of all the things you enjoy doing. You know, horseback riding or taking a walk on the beach, whatever it is. That's the kind of passion these psychopaths put into exerting control over people. And just like we respond when we see somebody crying, we say, oh my goodness, what can I do to help them and comfort them? When they see grief, when they see tears, whether it's from fear or anger or whatever it is, or grief, that stimulates them. It's like a wild animal attacking a person or another animal. The more it shrieks and screams, the more that stimulates them to keep going for the attack. And this has been explained to us not only by psychologists, but by a psychiatrist that I consulted with to say, help me understand this a little better.
Right.
What are the dynamics that go into how these people's brains work? Because they don't work like ours. They don't think like we do. They are always scheming to try to get, what can I do today to have power and control over people? And that's what they seek to do. It literally is an all-consuming obsessive compulsiveness that they have to seek control over people. I think some of it comes from insecurity on their own part, but some of it is just, I think that we don't have enough consequences in life. Like, for example, I think if my brothers had been thrown into jail for all the crimes they committed, and probably gotten beaten up in jail because they're not very friendly people, I think that would have been enough to keep a check on their acting out their obsessions. But I don't think it would ever cure them of their obsessions.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
If we had consequences in society, if there were some kind of consequences of, again, enforcing the laws, things like that, that they would be reticent to act out their impulses to harm people if they knew, well, if I do that, this is going to happen. Bam, 100% guaranteed, Yeah.
Exactly.
We don't have those. We don't have constraints. We don't have anything like that, Every situation you hear of, whether somebody uses a gun, a knife, a car, or whatever they're going to use, their bare hands, you see a long history of people complaining about their mean, alarming, dangerous behavior and speech, but nothing was ever done. And that's what needs to stop. We were working with our legislators on a few different issues to try to get some things to stop. And fortunately, I mean, we do live in a state that has better law enforcement, but unfortunately there are especially sections of the state like Knoxville, Nashville, Memphis, where they just don't really enforce the law all that well. They do a better job in our area. We're more rural, out from, the main big cities and stuff like that. But yeah, down in Atlanta where my one brother lives, they never enforce the law.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, even federal authorities, this is what we've been told by state and federal authorities. Yes, he's breaking the law. No, we're not going to put out the money.
Why?
Because they have certain agendas. They tell us that, again, well, we know that the prisons are overcrowded. And I'd say, well, the prisons are overcrowded because it's taken so much more drastic crimes that these people have committed.
Right.
If you were preventative and catching them when they had first started committing crimes, maybe that would have inspired them to not continue worse and worse crimes to finally get their backsides in prison.
Right.
But yeah, they will not enforce the laws. And of course, my brothers know that. These people who operate this way, they know the system's broken. And they operate that way. I mean, look what's happening in New York City, They know the system's broken and they run with it.
Yeah, see?
Yep.
Terrible. And I'm so glad that you brought this out on my podcast because this is very important to spread awareness. What an injustice. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
What an injustice.
I write in my book that, justice is a human need. It is just as important as food and shelter It is a human need. We need to have justice, because without justice, it paralyzes us in so many other things. You know, what we do, our livelihood, how we go about and interact with people. If we are denied justice, we are always on our guard. It's like we're living in a jungle, you know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And on that note, what's the special message that you would like to share with the listeners who are tuning in today and who are going to be listening on Monday morning? And where can people connect with you?
Yeah, I have 3 websites. One is for my book. It's www.fightingforjusticebook.com. I have another website that addresses the problem of abusive lawsuits. It's called www.stopabusivelawsuits.com. And I also deal with the cult issue, the religious angle, www.stopreligiousfrauds.com.
I see that. Okay, good.
And people can buy my book also, Fighting for Justice, Mental Illness, Religious Fraud, Mental Illness, and the Collapse of Law and Order on Amazon as well. It's in both paperback and Kindle.
Oh,
and yeah, so I'm basically, I wrote my book to try to encourage other people who are going through the same or worse circumstances than what I've been through, and to speak up, to contact your legislators. You know, some legislators will not listen. Our legislator's been pretty good, but he's coming up against a very powerful group called the Trial Lawyers Association. They don't want to see a stop to people weaponizing the courts because it provides them money.
There you go.
There it is. Money, 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 you know? And it's crazy because it's actually costing taxpayers a lot of money to keep hiring more and more judges to hear more and more cases. And here in Tennessee, we found out that every court in every county has what's called pro se day. And all of these people, and it's not to say that everybody who files a lawsuit pro se is a nut, you know, is abusing the court system. Right. There are some valid cases where people, they can't afford an attorney. It's usually a straightforward case. They've got all the documentation lined up, all their bills and things like that, and they can present a case. It's so clear cut. But unfortunately, the judges are simply not doing their jobs as court administrators. They're managers, they're court managers. And it is their job to review pro se lawsuits. These are people who don't have an attorney. It is their job to review these, to say, does it have merit or not? You know, does it have merit? Is it a legitimate lawsuit? Because when you look at some of these lawsuits that have been filed, it is clear. You don't even have to be a first-year law school student to see that they are abusive. I've talked to court clerks throughout the state of Tennessee, and they said they have been begging the judges, would you please screen these pro se or self-represented lawsuits, because these people are scary. You know, the judges have court security right on hand. I'm there, right there within feet. But the court clerks, they have to call out for security. So oftentimes these self-represented pro se litigants, they will take out their fury on the court clerks, and they have to call out for security. You know, so the judges are not doing anybody any favors. They're not doing themselves any favors, not reviewing these cases. Now, there are a few judges that I've talked to, and they have had experience with just, it's called sua sponte is the Latin term. It means the judge makes a decision without any motion on anybody's part, either the defendant's motion or the plaintiff's motion. They'll look at a lawsuit and they'll throw it right out. They won't even assign it a docket number. They look at it, you know, usually the court clerks brings it to their attention. They look at it and they say, nope, this isn't going. I'm not going to have the court denigrated by this kind of nonsense. And that's just it. We need judges to respect the court system. And I think a lot of this goes back to really kind of our breakdown in morals and in everything, and ethics in society as a whole. But the law schools are not teaching these judges to do the right thing. They're not teaching the lawyers to do the right thing. And when these lawyers become judges, they're not teaching them to do the right thing.
Right.
Again, justice is a human need. And we need to have a fair and equitable justice system. So I explain a little bit about more how did we get a pro se system where anybody can sue anybody under the sun. You can sue anybody for no reason whatsoever.
That's
Where
true.
court is set up. But it really does. It's based in Old English law, and it's good in theory. You know, Farmer Brown had his chicken stolen by Farmer Smith, and so Farmer Brown goes to a judge and says, "Farmer Smith stole my chicken. I want my chicken back." It's a good process, but like I said, a previous generation of judges would have never allowed it to be abused to the extent that it has been abused today. There have been actually lawsuits where these clowns sued God. It's like, well, the last time I checked, God didn't have an address that you could serve him court notice, right. You know? And one judge actually let it go through. Another judge did the right thing and stopped the lawsuit dead in its tracks. We need more judges like that. You know, we have some good judges, but we have, unfortunately, too many judges that, and I've heard this directly from lawyers, and from legislators, and from other judges. Some judges just don't care. They don't care. They're there, no matter how bad a job they do, they get their paycheck and their pension. They don't care.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't care. Exactly.
Yep. So speak up. That's my point. Speak up. Keep speaking up. If you know, I think podcasts are a great way to find a voice, whether somebody wants to start up their own website. I do advise people to talk to a constitutional attorney to find out how you can word things, what you can say, what you cannot say. In the situation with my websites, I did have an attorney review everything, and Tennessee does have what's called an anti-slap law. It's a public participation law that allows people to exercise their free speech.
There you go.
The thing of it is that lawyers from long ago told us the way your brother is acting online, calling himself a pastor, calling himself a business owner, he's a professional photographer, he claims, he is setting himself up as what's called a limited purpose public figure. And all public figures are open to public scrutiny. I mean, just in my writing this book, that makes me, in a sense, a limited purpose public figure. Doing these podcasts makes me a public figure. I'm open to public scrutiny. I advise anybody, look up what I'm saying. It is true. And I've presented a lot of documentation on especially the Stop Abusive Lawsuits website. Use documentation, public documentation, court records, things like that. I advise people who have been involved with cults. Cults, again, they're trying to gain public trust. And in gaining public trust, they are open to public scrutiny.
Yeah, see?
That's the way our country works. And so you have a free speech right to speak out. And if they've done something that is a public record, then you need to be able to speak out that truth and publish that public record, whether it's an arrest record and a conviction record, or whether it's civil court records, such as lawsuits that they've lost, things like that, or even their own words off of their own websites. You have to be careful with it a little bit because of copyright issues and stuff like that, but you can quote and you refer back. This came right directly from their public Facebook page, for example, and you make record of that. But yeah, there are ways to effectively and legally fight back against this. Again, we're still working with our legislators. We actually
keep doing it. Keep working it.
We had an attorney who works in the Bar Association, who's sort of like a liaison between the bar, the Tennessee Bar Association, and the legislature. She said, I'm having a hard time getting not just your issues addressed, but also other issues addressed. These judges just don't want to change. And she said, I suggest, as victims, you write directly to the judges. So, of course, we're having elections this coming November we elect judges here in this state, by and large. And we're going to be addressing them in letters. So we're going to be sending it to the chief judges and to the other judges underneath them to say, please, when you have these lawsuits come, you do owe people, you owe the victims the right to review these cases to see, do they have any merit? You're wasting court resources and you're dragging victims through hell unnecessarily to have these cases go forward as if they were legitimate cases. So that's in summary what we're going to be doing. So the fight continues.
Let the fight continue.
Yeah.
But on that note, we're going to bring a close to this broadcast. So thank you so much, Paulette, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be live here on my podcast, to spread awareness and to break the silence. So please continue what you're doing. So for folks who are watching, who are going to be catching the replay and listening to this podcast, please connect with Paulette, fightingforjusticebook.com, where you can buy her book, and also stopabusivelawsuits.com and stopreligiousfrauds.com.
And I have a contact form on those websites. So if people want to email me directly, they can.
Good. I saw that on your website. Great job. So that's good. That's important. Absolutely. So I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone, for those of you who are going to be listening to this podcast on Monday morning. And please like and subscribe to my podcast, Let's Break the Silence with Angeline, where we empower women to break the silence and help them find their voice, reclaim their voice, regain their power, and rediscover themselves after some sort of abuse. And you can like and subscribe on Anchor FM, Spotify, Google, Apple, and all the other live streams. And this will also be uploaded on my YouTube channel. So please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. So everyone, have a great day. Thank you, Paulette. Stay just for a few minutes after the broadcast.
Okay.
And we wish you all a great day. So be on the lookout for this new podcast episode, Fighting for Justice with Paulette Buchanan, on Monday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.